The distress signal came through at 3 in the morning ship time. Commander Daniel Crawford was asleep in his quarters when the alarm pulled him from a dream about home. He was on his feet before his eyes fully opened, his body trained by 15 years of military service to respond without thinking. He reached the bridge of the USS Retribution in under 2 minutes. His crew was already at their stations, their faces lit by the glow of tactical screens. The communications officer, a young woman named Brooke, turned to him with fear in her eyes. "Sir, it is Haven Colony. They are under attack."
Oh.
Daniel felt his heart stop for a single beat. Haven Colony was not just another human settlement to him. It was where his wife, Katie, lived with their daughter, Emma. He had sent them there because it was supposed to be safe. It was far from the border conflicts, far from the tensions with alien species, far from any possible danger. He had promised them a peaceful life away from the wars he fought. "How long ago did the signal come through?" he asked. His voice was steady and calm. "It had to be 47 minutes, sir." Daniel closed his eyes for just a moment. Haven Colony was 90 minutes away at maximum speed. By the time they arrived, whatever was happening would already be finished. But he gave the order anyway because there was nothing else he could do. "Get us there now." The ship shuddered as the engines pushed beyond their normal limits. Daniel stood at the center of the bridge and watched the stars blur into long lines of white light. He did not sit down. He did not speak to anyone. He simply waited and tried not to think about Katie's warm smile or the sound of Emma's laugh when he spun her around in his arms. They arrived to find nothing but fire and silence. Haven Colony had been a beautiful place once. Green hills rolled across the land and clean rivers flowed through valleys filled with wildflowers. Homes had been built by families who wanted a quiet life among the stars. Now it was all ash and ruin. The buildings were gone. The forests were burning with flames that reached toward the dark sky. The rivers had turned to clouds of steam. Daniel ordered his crew to scan for survivors. They searched for 2 long hours, hoping to find even one person still alive. They found 12,000 bodies scattered across the destroyed colony. They did not find a single living soul. He went down to the surface himself, against the advice of everyone around him. His officers told him it was not safe. They said there might still be enemies hiding nearby. They said he was too important to risk on a ruined world. He ignored every word they spoke. The smell hit him first when he stepped off the shuttle. Burned metal and melted plastic, and something far worse beneath it all. He walked through what remained of the colony's main street, stepping carefully over rubble and twisted debris. He recognized some of the buildings only by their broken foundations. There was the school where Emma was supposed to start. Her classes next month. She had been so excited about making new friends. There was the medical center where Katie volunteered 3 days a week because she could not stand to sit idle while others needed help. She had always been like that, always giving more than she had to give. He found them near the ruins of their home. Katie had died holding Emma tight in her arms. Her body curved around her daughter in a final desperate attempt to shield her from harm. It had not been enough. Nothing could have been enough against the weapons that did this terrible thing. Daniel knelt beside them on the scorched ground. He reached out and touched Katie's hair, still soft despite everything. He looked at Emma's small face, peaceful now in a way that broke something deep inside him. He did not cry. The tears simply would not come. Instead, something inside his chest went quiet and cold, like a raging fire suddenly freezing into solid ice. His communicator beeped. Lieutenant Harris was speaking, telling him they had intercepted a broadcast. An alien transmission sent across all frequencies for everyone to hear. Daniel needed to return to the ship to see it. He did not want to leave them lying there alone. But he stood up anyway, because there was nothing more he could do for them in this place of death. Back on the Retribution, the crew gathered on the bridge to watch the intercepted message. It came from the Velthari Empire, a species of tall reptilian creatures who had always viewed humanity as lesser beings. Their representative appeared on the main screen, covered in green scales, eyes cold and yellow. Utterly without remorse or mercy. "Let this be a lesson to the human vermin," the Velthari said, in a voice like grinding stones. You expand into territory that does not belong to you. You forget your proper place in the natural order of this galaxy. Haven Colony is a reminder of what happens to those who reach beyond their station. Accept your role as servants to the superior races or face complete extinction. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy shown. There will only be obedience or death. The message ended, and the screen went dark. The bridge was completely silent. No one knew what to say. Daniel stared at the blank screen for a very long time. Around him, his crew looked to their commander for guidance, for orders, for some sign of what they should do next. He gave them nothing at all. He simply turned without a word and walked back to his quarters alone. The official response came from Earth 2 days later. The United Defense Council expressed their outrage and their deepest sympathy for the victims. They condemned the attack in the strongest possible terms and called it a crime against all humanity. And then they urged diplomacy and patience. They spoke of opening communication channels, of finding a peaceful resolution, of avoiding a full-scale war that humanity might not be able to win. Daniel listened to their careful words, felt nothing but cold disgust rising in his throat. That night, he accessed the colony's security archives in secret. A recovery team had found a small drone that somehow survived the attack with its memory cores still working. Daniel downloaded all the footage and watched it alone in the darkness of his room. He saw the Velthari, their warships descend from the sky like metal dragons. He saw the colonists run and scream and beg for mercy that never came. He saw Katie grab Emma and sprint toward the emergency shelters. He saw them almost reach safety. He saw the plasma blast that killed them both in a single terrible instant. He watched the footage 3 times without blinking. Then he deleted it from every system so that no one else would ever have to witness what he had seen. Something had shattered inside. Daniel Crawford on that ruined world. But something else had taken shape in the empty space left behind. The grief was still there, vast and bottomless, like a black hole. But wrapped around it now was a new kind of purpose, cold and clear and absolutely unbreakable. He wrote his resignation letter that same night. It was short and professional and revealed nothing of his true plans. By morning, he had sent it to command and erased his personal files from every database he could access. He took a small shuttle to a nearby trading station and vanished into the endless. Crowd of travelers. The military searched for him for several weeks. They assumed he had taken his own life, destroyed completely by grief over losing his family. They held a small memorial service in his honor. His former crew spoke kind words about the man they had known. And then everyone moved on with their lives. They were all wrong about Daniel Crawford. He was not dead. He was not destroyed. He was simply gone, disappeared into the vast darkness between the stars where no one could find him. But he would return one day. And when he did, the Velthari would learn exactly what it meant to take everything from a man who had nothing left to lose. 5 years passed like shadows. Moving across the face of a cold moon, the galaxy continued to turn. Planets rose and fell. Empires expanded their borders. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, a legend was being born. They called him the Revenant. No one knew his real name or what he looked like. All they knew were the stories that spread from station to station, whispered in bars and trading posts across the Outer Rim. A human who attacked Velthari ships without warning or mercy. A ghost who appeared from nowhere, struck with terrible force, and vanished before anyone could respond. The first attack came 18 months after Haven Colony burned. A Velthari supply convoy, carrying weapons to a forward military base, was ambushed in an asteroid field. 3 ships were destroyed in under 4 minutes. There were no survivors left to tell what happened. The only evidence was the wreckage and a single message burned into the hull of the command vessel. 2 words only. Remember Haven? Daniel Crawford stood on the bridge of his stolen ship and watched the debris drift through space. His face showed nothing at all. No satisfaction. No joy. Just the same cold emptiness that had lived inside him since the day. He knelt beside his family's bodies. He was not alone in his war. Over the past 18 months, he had traveled to dozens of worlds and stations, searching for others who shared his hatred of the Velthari Empire. He found them in refugee camps, in hidden settlements, in the crews of merchant ships, and the cells of resistance fighters. He found people who had lost everything just like him. Lisa Hartwell became his second-in-command. She was a former Marine, tall and strong, with short dark hair and eyes that had seen too much death. Her entire platoon had been captured during the siege of New Portland 3 years before Haven burned. The Velthari had executed them one by one over the course of a week, broadcasting the killings across human space as a warning. Lisa had watched from a hospital bed, recovering from wounds that should have killed her, unable to do anything but scream. When Daniel found her, she was working as a cargo loader on a station near the border. She was drinking herself to death slowly, one bottle at a time. He sat down across from her in a dirty bar and told her about Haven Colony. He told her about Katie and Emma. He told her what he planned to do about it. Lisa put down her drink and looked at him, with clear eyes for the first time in months. "When do we start?" she asked. Nathan Cole was next to join them. He was a thin man with nervous hands and a brilliant mind that never stopped working. He had been a researcher at a scientific station studying new propulsion technology. The Velthari destroyed the entire station because they feared what humans might create if left unchecked. Nathan's wife and 2 sons died in the explosion. He survived only because he happened to be on a shuttle returning from a supply run. Nathan could build anything from almost nothing. He took apart captured Velthari technology and rebuilt it better than before. He created weapons and shields and sensor systems that the enemy never expected humans to possess. He rarely smiled and spoke even less, but his work was worth more than 100 soldiers. Others came over the following years. Pilots who had lost their squadrons, engineers whose families had been taken, soldiers who had watched their friends die and been told to accept peace instead of justice. They came from every corner of human space, drawn by rumors of the Revenant and what he represented. Daniel built his base inside an asteroid field that the Velthari considered too dangerous to patrol. The rocks tumbled and crashed against each other in an endless dance of destruction. Only someone crazy or desperate would hide there. Daniel was both. They hollowed out the largest asteroid and turned it into a fortress. They built docking bays for their growing fleet of ships, most of them stolen or salvaged from Velthari wreckage. They created training facilities and weapon storage and living quarters for the hundreds, who now called this place home. Daniel studied the Velthari every single day. He learned their language and their history and their culture. He memorized their military tactics and command structures. He mapped their weaknesses and blind spots. He knew them better than they knew themselves because knowledge was a weapon sharper than any blade. The Velthari were arrogant. This was their greatest weakness. They had ruled their region of space for thousands of years, crushing every species that dared to challenge them. They believed themselves superior to all other life forms, especially humans. They could not imagine that the soft, short-lived creatures they despised could ever pose a real threat. Daniel used their arrogance against them again and again. He attacked where they least expected. He retreated before they could respond in force. He made them look foolish in front of their own people and their allies. Every victory was small, but small victories added up over time. His fleet grew from 3 ships to 7, then to 12. His soldiers trained every day until they could fight in their sleep. His intelligence network spread across dozens of systems, feeding him information about Velthari's movements and plans. Lisa ran the military operations with an iron will and a tactical mind that surprised even Daniel. She never forgot what they had done to her platoon. She carried that memory like a burning coal inside her chest. Using it to fuel every decision she made, Nathan continued to improve their technology. He cracked Velthari encryption codes and built jamming devices that could blind their sensors. He designed new engines that made their ships faster than anything the enemy could field. He armed them with weapons that hit harder and reached farther than standard human. Military equipment. The crew began to believe they could actually win this war. Daniel let them believe it because hope made soldiers fight harder. But he knew the truth. They were still outnumbered 1,000 to 1. They were still fighting an empire that spanned hundreds of worlds. They could hurt the Velthari. They could make them bleed. but they could not defeat them. Not yet. 5 years after Haven Colony died, Daniel Crawford stood in the command center of his hidden base and looked at the map of Velthury space spread across the wall. Red dots marked their attacks over the years. There were dozens of them now, scattered across 3 sectors. Each one represented a small piece of revenge taken for the dead. Lisa walked up beside him and crossed her arms. Intelligence reports a large convoy heading for the Nexus station. Weapons, supplies, and fresh troops. Minimal escort. Daniel nodded slowly. How minimal? For cruisers, maybe 5. It was a risk. They had never attacked anything this well protected, but the reward would be worth it. Nexus Station was a major hub for Velthury operations in human space. Cutting their supply line there would set them back months. Prepare the fleet, Daniel said. All 12 ships. We hit them tomorrow. Lisa smiled for the first time in days. It was not a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a predator who finally had her prey in sight. Tomorrow would bring blood and fire and death. But that was the only language the Velthari understood. Daniel would speak it fluently until they learned to fear the very sight of human ships. The Revenant was coming for them, and he would never stop. High Commander Zorath stood before the Emperor's throne and tried to keep his tail from twitching with nervousness. The throne room of the Velthari homeworld was vast and cold, built from black stone that absorbed all light and warmth. The Emperor himself sat motionless on his seat of power, ancient and terrible, his yellow eyes fixed on the military commander who had failed him so many times. 17 ships, the Emperor said. His voice was soft but carried through the silent chamber like a blade. 17 of my warships destroyed by a handful of human vermin. Explain this to me, Zorath. Zorath lowered his head in submission. The one they call the Revenant is cunning, my Emperor. He strikes without warning and disappears before we can respond. Our patrols cannot find his base. Our spies cannot identify him. And find better spies. Send better patrols. The Emperor leaned forward on his throne. I will not be humiliated by creatures who should be serving us on their knees. Find this Revenant and bring me his head. If you fail again, I will have yours instead. Zorath bowed deeply and left the throne room with his heart pounding against his ribs. He had one chance left to save himself. One chance to end this human problem once and for all. He summoned Subcommander Kestrix to his personal chambers that same night. She arrived within the hour, standing at perfect attention before his desk. She was younger than most officers of her rank, but she had earned her position through skill rather than politics. She was patient and methodical, traits that most Velthari considered weaknesses, but Zorath recognized as strengths. I have a task for you, Zorath said. The most important task of your career. Kestrix listened without expression as he explained the situation. The Revenant had become more than a military problem. He had become a symbol of hope for the humans and a symbol of failure for the Empire. Defeating him was not just about stopping his raids. It was about proving that no species could challenge Velthari dominance and survive. You will have whatever resources you need, Zorath finished. Ships, soldiers, equipment. But you will find this human, and you will destroy him. Do you understand? Kestrix nodded once. I understand, High Commander. The Revenant will die. She spent the next 3 months hunting. She did not rush. She did not make assumptions. She gathered every piece of information about every attack the Revenant had made. She studied the patterns, the timing, the tactics. She interviewed survivors and analyzed wreckage and reviewed sensor logs frame by frame. The Revenant was good, but he was not perfect. No one was perfect. Kestrix noticed that his attacks always occurred near asteroid fields or nebulas, places where ships could hide and sensors could be fooled. She noticed that he never struck the same sector twice in a row. She noticed that his information was always accurate, which meant he had spies somewhere in the Velthari command structure. She set traps and waited. Most of them failed. The Revenant was too clever to fall for obvious bait. But Kestrix was patient. She learned from each failure and adjusted her approach. Finally, after 4 months of hunting, she caught a break. One of her patrols intercepted a small human ship trying to slip through Velthary space undetected. The pilot was young, barely old enough to fly. His name was Tyler Grant, and he carried coded messages that proved he worked for the Revenant. Kestrix interrogated him personally. She used every technique her people had developed over thousands of years of warfare. She offered him mercy if he cooperated. She promised him pain if he refused. She threatened his family, only to discover he had no family left. The Velthary had killed them all years ago. Tyler Grant did not break. Not when they hurt him. Not when they showed him what would happen next. Not when he was bleeding and broken on the floor of the interrogation chamber. He simply looked up at Kestrix with human eyes full of defiance and said nothing useful at all. On the third day, as Tyler lay dying from his wounds, he suddenly began to laugh. It was a weak sound, wet with blood, but it echoed through the chamber. "You think you caught me," he whispered. "You think this is a victory?" Kestrix leaned closer. "You will tell me where he hides." Tyler smiled with broken teeth. "I do not need to tell you anything. You already put a tracker in my blood. I felt it go in yesterday." He coughed and more blood came up. "He knows you are coming. He has always known." Kestrix felt something cold move through her chest. She turned to her technicians. "The tracking implant. Where is it leading?" The technicians checked their instruments. The implant was broadcasting clearly, showing Tyler's location on the ship. But there was something else. A second signal. Much weaker. Heading away from them at high speed. They had extracted the tracker during the interrogation without realizing it. Someone had taken it and fled while they were focused on the prisoner. "The Nebula of Shadows," a technician said. "The signal is heading there." Kestrix gathered her fleet immediately. 30 warships, the finest she could assemble. This was her chance. The Revenant was leading her to his base. She would crush him there and end this war in a single, decisive battle. Tyler Grant died an hour later. His last words were broadcast on an open channel for all her ships to hear. "He is coming for all of you." Kestrix ignored the warning. She was a hunter, and her prey was finally within reach. The Nebula of Shadows swallowed her fleet like a great dark mouth. Sensors became unreliable. Communications turned to static. Her ships flew in tight formation, trusting their instruments and each other. The first explosion came from inside her own formation. A cruiser on the left flank simply disappeared in a ball of fire. Then another on the right. Then 3 more in the center. Kestrix shouted. "All ships, defensive positions." But there was nothing to defend against. The enemy ships appeared from nowhere, striking and vanishing like ghosts. They knew exactly where to hit, exactly when to strike. They moved through the nebula as if they had been born there. Kestrix watched her fleet die around her. She gave orders that no one could follow. She fired weapons at enemies she could not see. She did everything right, and it made no difference at all. The battle lasted less than an hour. When it was over, 25 of her 30 ships were destroyed or crippled. The survivors fled into open space, engines burning at maximum. Sensors screaming warnings about damage and casualties. Kestrix escaped on a damaged cruiser, with less than half her crew still alive. She stood on the broken bridge and stared at the nebula behind them, where human ships were already disappearing back into the darkness. She had been the hunter. Now she understood the truth. She had always been the prey. For the first time in her life, Kestrix felt real fear. Not fear of death. Not fear of failure. Fear of an enemy who thought differently, fought differently, and refused to accept the natural order of the galaxy. The Revenant had beaten her completely. And somehow she knew this was only the beginning. The news of the Battle of Shadows spread across. Human space like wildfire burning through dry grass. For the first time in living memory, humans had defeated a major Velthary force in open combat. Not just survived, not just escaped. Defeated them completely and sent the survivors running. Earth's government could no longer pretend the Revenant did not exist. They could no longer dismiss him as a terrorist or a pirate or a madman causing trouble on the frontier. He had become something far more dangerous. He had become a symbol. Admiral Greg Patterson received his orders directly from the United Defense Council. Find the Revenant. Open negotiations. Bring him back into the fold or convince him to stop his attacks before the Velthari retaliated against all of humanity. Patterson was 63 years old with gray hair and a face lined by decades of service. He had fought in 3 wars and negotiated 2 peace treaties. He understood politics and power and the delicate balance between them. But he also understood something the politicians did not. He understood anger. His own brother had died on Haven Colony. A doctor who had moved there to escape the stress of working in a military hospital. Patterson had never spoken publicly about his loss. He had buried his grief beneath duty and responsibility. But it was still there, burning quietly in the back of his mind. He found the Revenant through channels that existed outside official records. Messages passed through intermediaries. Coordinates exchanged in encrypted bursts. After 3 weeks of careful communication, a meeting was arranged on a station in neutral space. Patterson went alone as requested. He walked into a private room in the back of a cargo bay and found Daniel Crawford waiting for him. The man looked nothing like his military photographs from 6 years ago. He was thinner now, harder, with eyes that had seen too much death and learned to live with it. He wore simple clothes, with no rank insignia, no medals, nothing to mark him as anything other than an ordinary human being, Admiral Daniel said. "Thank you for coming." Patterson sat down across from him at a small metal table. "I almost did not recognize you, Commander. You look different. I am different." Daniel's voice was flat and calm. "What does Earth want?" Patterson laid out the offer carefully. A full pardon for Daniel and all his followers. Resources and ships from Earth's official military. Integration into the command structure with Daniel retaining significant authority. In exchange, he would coordinate his attacks with Earth's strategic goals and stop provoking the Velthari into larger conflicts. Daniel listened without. When Patterson finished, he was silent for a long moment. "You want me to stop?" Daniel finally said. "I want you to be smart. The Velthari are already angry. If you keep pushing them, they will respond with overwhelming force. Not just against you. Against all human worlds, they already responded with overwhelming force."
Oh.
Daniel's eyes never blinked. "They killed 12,000 civilians on Haven Colony. They executed prisoners of war on broadcast. They burn our settlements and call us vermin. What exactly do you think I am provoking that has not already happened?" Patterson leaned forward. "I understand your anger. Believe me, I do. My brother died on Haven." Something flickered in Daniel's eyes. A brief moment of connection between 2 men who had lost family to the same enemy. "Then you understand why I cannot stop," Daniel said quietly. "They took everything from us. And Earth's response was to ask for peace, to urge diplomacy, to tell us to accept our place in the galaxy." He shook his head slowly. "I will not accept it. I will never accept it." Patterson reached into his jacket and pulled out a small data chip. "Before you decide, I want you to see something." He slid the chip across the table. Daniel picked it up and inserted it into a reader on his wrist. His face did not change as he watched. Patterson saw his jaw tighten. The chip contained classified recordings from Velthari space. Experiments conducted on human prisoners. Tests to determine how much pain humans could endure. Studies on the most efficient methods of execution. Medical procedures performed without anesthesia to see how long humans could remain conscious during dissection. "Our intelligence services recovered these 3 months ago," Patterson said. "The Council buried them because they were afraid of how the public would react. Afraid it would make people demand war instead of peace." Daniel removed the chip and set it carefully on the table. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I need you to understand something." Patterson met his eyes directly. "Officially, I am here to bring you back or shut you down. Those are my orders. But I stopped believing in those orders the moment I saw these recordings." He stood up and straightened his uniform. "I cannot join you openly. I have responsibilities to the fleet, to my crew, to the system that still believes in diplomacy, but I can help you in other ways. Supplies diverted from official channels. intelligence reports that happen to reach the wrong destinations, ships that patrol in the wrong places at the wrong times. Daniel studied him for a long moment. Why would you risk your career? Your freedom? Patterson smiled sadly. Because my brother believed in helping people. He died believing humanity was better than this endless cycle of fear and submission. Maybe he was wrong. But I would rather honor his memory by fighting back than by watching everything he believed in fade away. He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. The Velthri Emperor is gathering a fleet. The largest assembly of warships in a century. They are coming for you, Commander. Whatever you are planning, you need to do it soon. Daniel nodded once. Thank you, Admiral. Patterson left the station and returned to his flagship. He filed a report stating that negotiations had failed and the Revenant could not be reasoned with. He recommended continued monitoring but advised against direct military action that might drive the rebel leader further from potential cooperation. The Council accepted his report without question. They had other concerns to deal with. The Velthiri were making threatening noises again, demanding reparations for the ships lost in the nebula of shadows. Earth's politicians were busy drafting apologetic messages and offering concessions. Meanwhile, Patterson began quietly diverting resources. A shipment of weapons here. A batch of medical supplies there. Intelligence reports that somehow found their way to anonymous recipients. Nothing that could be traced back to him. Nothing that would raise suspicion. He told himself it was for the good of humanity. Deep down, he knew it was personal. The brother he had lost. The anger he had buried. The hope that maybe, just maybe, one man could make a difference against an empire. In the Velthri throne room. The Emperor received reports of the gathering armada. 200 warships from across the Empire, the finest vessels and crews available. High Commander Zorath had staked his life on this mission. If he failed again, his blood would stain the palace floors. The Emperor approved the operation with a wave of his ancient hand. These humans had become an annoyance that needed to be crushed. The Revenant would die. His followers would die. And any world that had aided them would burn as an example to others. The fleet departed 3 days later, cutting through space toward the asteroid field, where intelligence suggested the rebel base was hidden. 200 warships against 32 rebel vessels. It should have been no contest at all. But the Emperor did not understand humans. He did not understand what they became when pushed beyond all limits. He did not understand that sometimes the smaller force wins because they have nothing left to lose. He would learn soon enough. Daniel stood in the command center and watched the enemy fleet appear on his sensors. 200 warships in perfect formation, bristling with weapons, carrying enough firepower to crack a planet in half. They moved through space like a wall of death, unstoppable and absolute. His own fleet numbered 32 vessels. Most were stolen or salvaged, held together by Nathan's genius and the determination of their crews. They were faster and more maneuverable than Velthri ships, but in a straight fight they would be overwhelmed in minutes. Daniel had never planned to fight straight. Begin withdrawal to secondary positions, he ordered calmly. Draw them into the field. The asteroid field had been their home for 5 years. They knew every rock, every gap, every dangerous current of debris. The Velthri saw only chaos and destruction. Daniel's people saw a weapon waiting to be used. Lisa stood beside him, her hand resting on the console. The charges are in place. Nathan confirms all systems are ready. Daniel nodded. For years, his teams had been preparing for this moment. They had planted dormant viruses in Velthri computer systems through captured equipment and turned spies. They had sabotaged fuel depots along the supply routes. They had mapped the exact frequencies the enemy used for navigation and communication. Now, it was time to use everything they had built. The Velthri armada entered the asteroid field with confidence. Their sensors showed the rebel fleet retreating before them, scattering into the rocks like frightened animals. High Commander Zorath smiled on the bridge of his flagship and ordered his ships to pursue. That was his first mistake. The asteroids began to move. Not randomly, as they always did, but deliberately. Explosive charges planted years ago detonated in sequence, sending massive rocks tumbling into new paths. Velthary ships that had been safely navigating suddenly found their routes blocked. Collisions began almost immediately. Navigation systems are failing, an officer reported on one of the Velthary cruisers. We are receiving conflicting data. The virus Nathan had designed was spreading through their network. It did not destroy anything obvious. It simply changed numbers slightly, made sensors report positions that were almost correct but not quite. Ships that thought they were safe found themselves crashing into asteroids. Ships that tried to avoid collisions flew directly into each other. Zoroth watched his formation fall apart around him. He screamed orders that no one could follow because his communications were filled with static and false signals. He fired weapons at enemies he could not see clearly, hitting his own ships as often as the rebels. Daniel waited until the chaos reached its peak. Then he gave the order to attack. His 32 ships swept out of hiding places throughout the field, striking from every direction at once. They hit damaged vessels first, finishing off ships that were already crippled. They targeted engine sections and weapon systems, turning warships into helpless debris. The battle became a slaughter. Velthary crews panicked as their technology betrayed them. Officers who had never faced real resistance did not know how to adapt when their plans fell apart. They had been taught that humans were weak and inferior. They had never considered what might happen if that teaching was wrong. Lisa led a squadron directly through the center of the enemy formation, her weapons blazing. She did not think about strategy or tactics. She thought about her platoon, executed one by one while she watched helplessly. Every Velthary ship she destroyed was payment for that memory. Nathan monitored the virus from the command center, making adjustments in real time to keep the enemy confused. His hands moved across the controls with steady precision. He thought about his wife and sons, killed because the Velthary feared human intelligence. Now that intelligence was destroying them, Daniel watched the battle unfold and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. This was not joy. This was not victory. This was simply the natural consequence of everything the Velthary had done. They had sowed death across human space for generations. Now they were reaping what they had planted. The flagship remained in the center of the chaos, protected by its escorts. Zoroth was trying to rally his forces to establish some kind of organized defense. Daniel pointed at it on the display. That one is mine. He took personal command of his ship and led a strike team directly toward the flagship. The escorts tried to intercept, but Lisa's squadron swept in from the side and drew them away. A path opened through the destruction. Daniel brought his ship alongside. It was a Velthary flagship, and ordered the boarding party to prepare. 20 soldiers in combat armor, the best fighters he had. Lisa wanted to lead them herself, but Daniel refused. This was something he needed to do personally. They cut through the hull and entered the enemy ship. The corridors were filled with smoke and emergency lighting. Velthary soldiers rushed to stop them, but they were unprepared for the ferocity of the human assault. Daniel's team fought through every obstacle, advancing steadily toward the bridge. They found Zoroth waiting for them. The High Commander stood alone in the center of his bridge, weapon in hand, surrounded by the bodies of his own officers who had died when the humans breached the door. He was tall and proud, his scales gleaming in the dim light. "Human vermin," Zoroth hissed. "You think this changes anything? More fleets will come. We will burn every world you have ever touched." Daniel stepped forward, his own weapon ready. "You destroyed Haven Colony. 12,000 civilians. My wife. My daughter. They were nothing. Your entire species is nothing." Daniel moved faster than Zoroth expected. The fight was brief and brutal. Zoroth was a warrior trained from birth in the arts of combat. Daniel was something else entirely. He was 6 years of cold fury compressed into a single moment of violence. When it was over, Zoroth lay dead on the floor of his own bridge. Daniel stood over the body and felt the emptiness inside him shift slightly. The revenge he had sought for so long was complete, but Katie and Emma were still gone. Nothing could bring them back. Nothing could fill the hole they had left in his heart. He walked to the communications console and opened a channel that would broadcast across the entire system and beyond. His face appeared on screens throughout the surviving Velthari ships and on relay stations that would carry his words back to the Empire itself. "My name is Daniel Crawford," he said. His voice was calm and clear. "6 years ago, you came to our worlds. You burned our homes. You murdered our families and called us weak. You were wrong." He paused and looked directly into the camera. "Humanity remembers. Humanity endures. And humanity came back for revenge. This is your only warning. Withdraw from our space. Never return. Or we will find your homeworld, and we will teach you what extinction truly means." He ended the transmission and walked off the bridge without looking back. The battle ended within the hour. Of the 200 Velthari warships that had entered the asteroid field, fewer than 40 escaped. The rest were destroyed or captured, their crews dead or surrendering in the months that followed. The Velthari Empire pulled back from human territory entirely. They had learned a lesson written in the blood of their finest soldiers. Humans were not vermin to be exterminated. They were a species that grew stronger under pressure, that fought harder when pushed to the edge, that never forgot and never forgave. Daniel Crawford became a legend whispered in the halls of alien councils across the galaxy. The Revenant. The human who came back from death to destroy an empire's dream of conquest. He returned to his base in the asteroid field and continued to watch the stars. Lisa stood beside him, as she always did. Nathan worked on new projects in his workshop. The survivors of 100 tragedies built new lives in the fortress they had created together. Peace had come. But Daniel knew it would not last forever. The galaxy was vast and full of species who might one day look at humanity and see prey. When that day came, he would be ready, because humanity was no longer the weak species cowering at the edge of known space. They were the predators now. And the galaxy would remember that for a very long time.